we are studying our Torah portion, and that is a very interesting episode in the life during the 40-year-long wandering of Israelites in the Sinai desert. So what we have is basically a series of episodes that describe different rebellions that occurred during this time in the desert, and the rebellion of Korach is the most interesting one. When we look at who is this fellow, Korah, we need to study a little bit of genealogy. This is very important to understand. Today we had a outdoor meeting with Russians at the those who live in Vancouver will make sense, Fairground Park. And so usually during the Sabbath school, I have a youth Sabbath school. And since the quarterly was actually very important because it was talking about how to study the Bible, I asked the kids, what are the most difficult books of the Bible? And some of them answered, depends. Some of them make a very standard answer saying, oh, this is the book of Revelation. And I know the standard answer. I don't believe the book of Revelation is the most challenging book, but several of them made a very interesting statements about the book of Numbers and the other books that have list of names. And they're quite boring when you read this. You know, the other day, Jacob and I, during our morning devotion, read through the book of Ezra. And of course, we read chapter by chapter. And when you get to chapter 2, it's a long chapter with a list of names. And you go through this. What are you going to do with this? You know, these list of names are probably not very good for any devotion, but they're there for a reason. So we're going to discover who is this fellow Korach to understand the gravity of what's happening. First of all, I want to go all the way to the book of Exodus, and you will see the story in chapter 6. And hear what it says. So, like in the midst of the story of plagues, you suddenly have this list of names. From the tribe of Reuben, from the tribe of Simeon, and here what are interested for us. These are the names of sons of Levi, according to their generation. Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. So then you have years of the life of Levi, which is not our particular concern today. Then you have a list of their Levi's grandchildren. So you got the sons of Gershon, Libni, and Shimi. Then you get the sons of Kohath, okay? And you get Amram and Yizhar. And then, of course, Hebron and Uziel. So then you go to the story of Amram, and you learn that Amram married Jochebed, and she gave birth to two brothers, Aaron and Moses. Now let's go back to Numbers chapter 16 and take a careful read. Korach was a son of whom? Of Yizhar, the son of Kohath, the son of Levi. So going back, I can probably just do a quick drawing of the family tree. So you got Levi, then you got Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. Okay, then you get next generation is Amram, then Yizhar, then you got Hebron, and then you got Uziel, and then you get this. Moses and Aaron. And here you got Korach. Do you see the problem? They're very well related. They are cousins. You see why it's so painful? The book of Numbers. I always speak of the book of Genesis as the family book. But it is interesting that the book of Numbers has also family issues. And particularly when it pertains to Moses. I give you another example from what you have heard from Max. It's a story found in Numbers chapter 12. And that is an example of the story of racism in the Bible and God's treatments of racism. This is the sister. And they're polite here in the English Bible. They spoke against Moses because of the Ethiopian woman, which is Zipporah. That's the wife of Moses. And she's not Ethiopian. She is, you know, it's kind of an interesting. When in the United States they determine race, the Caucasian race is determined very broadly. They say people of origin of Europe, Middle East, and North Africa. Which is what? So, makes no sense to me how they determine it, because some of the people from Arabian Peninsula, I don't know why they decided to call them Caucasian, but it just shows that all these definitions are actually unnatural and phony, just because it's not really possible to properly classify any person by the color of skin. It's not possible. The Bible doesn't do it. But here, they're attacking Moses for his wife, and they are using in the original, they're using a racial term here. And look at the similarity. So here is, why is she actually trying to offend Moses using his wife? It says here which gave Moses a huge pain and hurt, because definitely he loves his wife. I don't know, he didn't care, he definitely, when he married her, didn't care about, didn't think these terms, which are, of course, the invention of rather 18th, 19th century. But it says here, I like how they translate it. Now Moses was very humble, more than any man who were on the face of the earth. You know what they did incorrectly? Moses was not very humbled. Moses I already betrayed myself. Moses was not very humble. Moses was very humbled. You see the difference? When his own sister attacked him because of his wife, using that, before any racial terminology ever occurred, Moses felt very humbled, very offended, and it says, more than all men who were on the face of the earth. This is very interesting, because I don't know what Max preached to you on this subject, but I always, speak in this political, to me, this is political terms. When I come to America, this is all totally different. Back in my country, we call ourselves Russians, Ukrainians, Lithuanians, Jews, Moldovans, by language which we use. And it's mainly language, like we have in our Russian congregation, we use Russian because everybody understands Russian, but we have quite a few Ukrainians. Today, at the end of the youth Sabbath school, I asked one fellow to pray, and he prayed in Ukrainian. and everybody is okay that he prayed in Ukrainian. And we are used to differences in language, not in differences how people actually appear. But when I come here and I see these things, white man, black man, this is all foreign to me. You know, we had in my country, we had students from Africa, but it wasn't like this. They came to study, you know, some of them stayed. We have several, you know, Ukrainian parliament has several, you know, deputies, parliament deputies, who are from the mixed family, meaning one of them, his father was Nigerian and his mother was Ukrainian. Nobody cares. This question was never. In Ukraine, there was the issue of anti-Semitism, not now. It's kind of a little difference, you know, the first Jewish president, the first time Jew was elected as president of Ukraine. But it was all different. But when I hear this, when I hear these conversations, and when I hear there's statements about the acts based on racism, and when I hear people share experiences about how they were oppressed on a racial basis, I always pull this text and I said, look, there was one white man by the name Moses, and he was, the Bible says, he was at first humbled by the Russian slur. But the interesting part of it was his own sister who did it. You know, it was his own sister who did it to him. And it really, really, really humbled Moses. But why did she do this? And this is a big problem. This is the underlying question. Did she really think that bad about her sister-in-law? And she knew her not even for 10 years. It was more than 10. I'm just counting. Maybe not. Yeah, she knew him. But anyway, yeah, because it took, they lived together in, you know, in the desert of Sinai, and then he brought her as her wife and his children, introduced to her family. Anyway, so, but the question arose already in the desert, you know. But what is she after? That's what she's after. She's after, not after the race of her sister-in-law. She is after this. Has the Lord indeed spoken only through Moses? He has not spoken through us also? It was a power struggle. That's what it is. This is what she's after. The rest of it, it was just a very bad and ugly, but a smoke screen. But deep inside, she felt like she mistreated God. Literally, this is what was it. Not only did she badly humiliated Moses, her own brother, but she terribly mistreated God. Why did she do this? Because God gave her prophecies, because she's a prophetess. Her prophecy is recorded in the book of Exodus chapter 15. That's the song of Miriam. This is what we know. This is the word that are very important. When we go to Exodus 15, we see here what she particularly says. Who is like you, O Lord, among the gods? Who is like you, glorious in holiness, fearful in praises, doing wonders? So she gives the she's also a prophetess. She writes poetry, but she doesn't feel like God has spoken through her as much as he's spoken through Moses, and that's what she does. Why am I bringing Numbers 12, the story of Numbers 12, here? And the story of Moses and Miriam and Aaron? Because, unfortunately, I'll digress here for a second and give you a little bit of scholarly approach to the methods of Bible study. When we read Torah, we find two major styles in there: legal style and narrative style. So narrative is pretty easy to study, but when we study narrative, we have to be aware that it is connected. We cannot just say, oh, this is Numbers chapter 12, this is an isolated story of Miriam and Aaron speaking against Moses, and chapter 16, which is isolated story of now Korach speaking against Moses. Well, they're not isolated. I believe Korach had already an example from Aaron and Miriam. And that's what he was going after, this bad example. Unfortunately, the way how God dealt with Miriam did not teach Korach any lesson. And this is why at the end of this story, Korach was swallowed by the earth. Miriam was not swallowed by the earth. Miriam was stricken with something white, which is definitely God's satire on her statement that she didn't like the color of the skin of her sister-in-law. You want to be very white, God says, you're gonna be very white. So it's a kind of a sarcasm from God's part, but she didn't die. She repented. It's not leprosy what it is. It's a different skin disease. Basically, this didn't teach Korach any lesson. So going back to my original thinking, now you understand the whole narrative of Torah is connected. And very often when we ask question why, we need to read previous stories. Previous stories may have a clue why the subsequent stories happen. And that's the way how we need to read the narrative part. It's one continuous narrative of wandering around desert, which is important, and it's not a collection of isolated episodes that are like a tapestry. No, it's not a tapestry. It's a continuous thread. And so basically, we have a very similar situation. We have a Korach who, instead of learning lesson and seeing God's mercy on Miriam, he is going one step further. With Miriam and Aaron, you can call it a family squabble because, hey, cousins, you know, there are quite a few families that have close relations with cousins. But I tell you, the healthy family, you deal within your family unit. Husband and wife, brother and sister. You don't bring cousins into that. That is not very healthy. Especially, it may be a very negative effect on the marriage when, for example, he marries her and he has like brothers and cousins, and he is influenced by what his brothers and even cousins tell him, and she is not really, she has a different position, and then it becomes basically it becomes basically like very, very, very unhealthy. So, but that's how it went. It went in a wider situation, and more so, besides cousins, these guys, Dathan, Abiram, Eliab, On, they're the sons of Reuben. They have nothing to do with the family matters of Aaron. I mean, back, going up the branches of the family tree, yeah, they are the same family from forefather Jacob, but come on, these guys are, I don't know if I draw the family line, I don't know if I'll be able to reconstruct every, you know, all of them, but you can do it and you'll see how many steps removed it's going to be. It is going to be many steps removed, because you have Reuben and Levi, their brothers, and their children are cousins to each other. So it's going to be 2 or 3 step removed cousins. And I don't know, it's not very often that you get a family situation like this, that you are able to maintain strong family relations with cousins that are 3-4 step removed, right? It happens periodically, but not very frequent. People move out and, you know, on and on and on. But these guys are together, and it says here that all of them, they are leaders of the congregations. So they're representatives of the congregation. They're men of renown. And what's the claim against Moses here? Say, Moses. You take too much upon yourselves, for all the congregation is holy, every one of them, and the Lord is among them. Why then do you exalt yourself above the assembly of the Lord? Well, what's this all about? Why is this claim now? Do you see that this is a very similar claim Miriam made, but more to Moses? This seems to be more against Aaron. This seems to be more against Aaron. And so, what's the problem? And why are they saying all congregation is holy? Why the word holy is used here? Very important. Very important. Let's go to the beginning of it. And again, we are in the narrative section of the Torah. That's why it's important to see all preceding events to fully understand what these subsequent events actually happen, mean. So we go to Exodus 19 and we go starting verse 5, and it's Israelites before the Mount Sinai. And it says here, now therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, then you shall be special treasure to me above all people, for all the earth is mine. And you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Do you see? When these guys are saying, aren't the entire nation holy? Why do you take upon yourself too much? They are referring to God's promise that all Israel is a holy nation. So why are you taking too much upon yourselves? Well, in this particular case, that was indeed original God's intention and his promise. But as you can see, this promise was very conditional. This is very important. I will digress again here a little bit into theology. There are two major extremes. One extreme says, you see, Israel is a holy nation. That's it. It has to be the holy nation, no matter what no matter what they do. Well, and they operate on this premise that all what God promised to Israel will come true no matter what. And this is how they come up with an idea of the restoration of the temple, and that's what they use. Well, the opposing side says, look, it says, if you obey my voice and keep my covenant. And they say, see, this promise of being a holy nation is conditional. So everything what God in the prophecies promised to Israel is conditional. And Israel failed to meet the requirements of these conditions. It's not that black and white in this sense here, and that's the biggest problem. People are loving extremes, but it's not as clear cut. Look at the book of Isaiah, chapter 49. Isaiah 49 says, can the woman forget her nursing child and not have compassion on the son of her womb? Surely they may forget, yet I will not forget you. See, I inscribe you on the palms of my hand. Some of you might have heard me speak on this chapter many times, but some of you might not. But I am pretty sure that most of you have heard these particular verses about can a woman forget her nursing child, and a promise, no, even if it happened, I will not forget you, to be used as a uplifting passage for people who are in depression and so forth. I'm not opposed to use this text like this, but I have to show you that this text specifically was addressed to Israel. Verse 14 says, but Zion said, the Lord has forsaken me, and the Lord has forgotten me. So this response is to Zion. God says, I will not forget you. He says first and foremost to Zion. And so in this particular case, what kind of conditions are to this conditional prophecy? I mean, is this a conditional prophecy? Can we say, and some people do, very unfortunately, some Christians do, can we say that text like this was addressed to Zion, but since Zion failed God's expectation, now it is not addressed to Zion, and God has not anymore inscribed any Jew on the palms of his hands. Now it is to the church. This makes no sense. When God says, I will not forget you, I have inscribed you on palms of my hands, and now look at this. Your walls are continuously before me. This is not about church. What kind of walls does church have? I mean, and if some people may confuse and say, oh, this talks about the walls of the church building, guess what? Here are 20, here we have 18 people listening, and we are connected through the wires and cables and satellite, not inside a wall of a building. This makes no sense. That is why it is important to see Not every prophecy to Israel is conditional. And I use this example constantly to show that God does have unconditional prophecies toward Israel. But having said that, I have to go back to Exodus 5 to demonstrate the Exodus 19 verse 5, which we read, to demonstrate to you that in the case of being a special treasure and being the kingdoms of priests, that is conditional. It's conditional upon fulfilling the covenant. Of course, you cannot pull this text and apply it to the first century events and say, oh, now they're no longer chosen because they rejected Jesus. You know, this very popular statement which some Christians make, oh, Jews used to be chosen, but they rejected Jesus, now they're no longer chosen. Well, what is this here? What is keeping the covenant refers to? Well, again, the narrative method of narrative study. First of all, we need to ask question, what does it mean? How does the kingdom of priests, how would the kingdom of priests, that promise of becoming a kingdom of priests, how this promise would be realized? And the answer is found in Exodus chapter 13. Here it says, consecrate to me all firstborn, whatever opens the womb among the children of Israel. This is specifically Exodus chapter 13. It says, set apart all that opens the womb, and basically it will explain that you have to put the firstborn sons for the service at the sanctuary. This is the reason why you have this dedication. So this is how Israel was supposed to become the kingdom of priests. However, let's go back to Exodus chapter 19, and we see what happens. So God promises, and so now all the people react to the promise of becoming the kingdom of priests, and the reaction is very simple. All the Lord has spoken will do. And what the Lord has spoken, keep my covenant. They receive the Decalogue, the 10 commandments. Then they receive the judgments, Exodus 21 through 23. Then they have a special ceremony where they seal the covenant, and the covenant is officially made. That's the celebration of Shavuot, the first Shavuot, right? So then what we see is a tragedy, the golden calf. Moses left to the mountain to receive instructions on how to build the sanctuary. But when he comes back, we have a tragedy. Exodus chapter 32. Make us gods that shall go before us, for as this Moses, the man who brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we will not know what has become of him. So the crowd demanded of Aaron to make a visible representation of God. I will not agree that they're asking make us gods here, because that translation, New King James, it has to be God in singular, because here is Elohim. Make us God, because we're got used to this flashes of lightning and rumbling of the thunder, and where is Moses? Who knows? We need some sensual visual representation. Of course, when they got the golden calf as they wished, then they began all kinds of stuff, because they began to play. Usually in this context, it means sexual play. So Moses comes and he is outraged. And here it says in Leviticus 32, verse 26, Moses stood up at the entrance of the camp and said, whoever is on the Lord's side, come to me. And all sons of Levi gathered themselves together to him. You see the history here? Very important. At the crucial, critical moment, his own brethren supported Moses. They were the ones who did not break the commandment of God. You see, all others broken the covenant as soon as Moses left. Levites did not break the covenant. So you see how condition works? Condition works that the holiness and priesthood remains with the tribe of Levi because of that. It was not supposed to be like this, but it became like this because of the golden calf. Make sense? So when we go now to the book of Numbers and we go to chapter 8, we have a very development of this concept. It says here in verse 10, so you shall bring the Levites before the Lord, and children of Israel shall lay their hands on the Levites, and Aaron shall offer the Levites before the Lord like a wave offering from the children of Israel, that they may perform work for the Lord. And so Thus you shall separate Levites from among children of Israel, and the Levites shall be mine. After that, Levites shall go go into the service of the tabernacle of meeting, so you shall cleanse them. For they are wholly given to me from among children of Israel. I have taken them for myself, I've opened instead of all who open the womb, the firstborn of the children of Israel. Do you see what's happening? Very important. This is very clear progression of history. So you have initially the ones who serve in the sanctuary are supposed to be the firstborn of every family. That's how Israel was supposed to be a holy nation. Through the firstborn, every family would be a part of the holiness. But because of the golden calf, it didn't happen. And now he takes the tribes of Levi and he says, you're going to be holy to me instead of the firstborn. So what these Korah and his associates say is a complete disregard to what God said basically maybe few months before. Because remember how the narrative of the book of Numbers progresses. You have a year after the sanctuary is erected, the assembly of Israel is ready to go. They are going and they get the dedication of the Levites. And then, of course, you get all these events with spies and stuff like this, and the verdict to walk 40 years around the desert, and this Korach situation. So only a few months passed when God made it clear, no more all congregation is holy. No more. It's not going to be happening, unfortunately, because you guys had this golden calf worship. So what is, who is holy? The Levites are holy because they represent the entire congregation of Israel. Okay? Now, so what are they complaining if Korach is a cousin of Moses from the same tribe of Levi and he is holy? What is he complaining? Well, let's take a look at what is happening. So the question initially was, is all congregation is holy? You took too much. So, like, Moses says, hello? This is not for me. I didn't do it. So he falls on his face. And then he says, all right, tomorrow morning, the Lord will show who is his and who is holy. So he gives it straight to the Lord. And I will cause him to come near, and I will cause him to come near to him, that the one whom he chooses will cause to come near to him. So thus take censors, Korach and your company, put fire and put incense in them before the Lord tomorrow, and it shall be that the man whom the Lord chooses is the Holy One. You take too much upon yourself, sons of Levi. So Moses kind of brings back this too much to Korach, but he says it in a different sense. You take too much upon yourself to decide like this. We need God. I am not the one deciding it. Even, yes, God speaks through me, but I'm not the one deciding, because it's easy in that setting of wandering around desert for Moses to prove himself that he is the prophet, because God constantly makes supernatural acts through Moses. So, and Moses constantly is asking for signs, and God gives signs, so that's no problem. So then he says to Korah, now hear you, hear now you sons of Levi. Is it small thing that to you that the God of Israel has separated you from the congregation of Israel to bring you near to himself, to do work of the tabernacle of the Lord, and stand before the congregation to serve them? And that he has brought you near to himself, you and your brethren, the sons of Levi, with you, and you are seeking the priesthood also. Therefore, you and your company are gathered together against the Lord. And what is Aaron that you complain against him? So that's the issue. Moses puts it right there to them. Are you looking to be priests? What's your problem? The same way as Miriam's problem was not because she was a racist at this time. Miriam's problem was, hey, God has not given me enough prophecies to utter. That's not for human being to decide. And Miriam has learned lesson, but Korah has not learned any lesson, unfortunately. And so, but he is driven by the same ulterior motives. He is not trying to seek, like a separation of powers or more democracy. He is seeking the priesthood. And it's kind of an interesting, and I repeated this many times, in these events that are happening in the US and partially in Canada, I don't know at what scale in Canada, what I see here in our neck of the woods, they use the right words and right slogans, but I have suspicion that these people who put this through are actually do not care for the slogans they say. They are looking for some ulterior motives and abusing the situation, or not abusing, but rather using the situation, using this to their advantage. I am suspicious of that. And I see facts that that support my suspicion. Part of my radar is working in a mode of suspiciousness because I've seen the history of Russia and things that are happening today in the 21st century in the United States. There is somewhat similar things were happening in Russia in 1917 And during the recent Arab Spring in the Middle East, which I don't know if you kind of watched that and understood what was going on. But Egypt was a good example of it. Egypt has been a military dictatorship since 1950s. After the officers of the military trained by British took control. And so first they had Gamal Abdel Nasser, who was very socialistic, but he was military. And then they had Anwar Sadat, who was leaning toward the right and more friends of the United States, but he was still a dictator. He was a military dictator. Egypt did not have a democracy. And why Egypt? Egypt is the largest Arab country in the world. It's probably now today about 140 million people. This is very densely populated, and because of that, it's very economically deprived country. So they had assassinated Sadat and put Mubarak. Mubarak was following in the footsteps of Sadat, being a friend to the West, but he was the same. Army was in control of the entire country. Military owned everything in the country. The military was corrupt. So there was an uprising. The major uprising, people who were protesting in this Al-Tahrir Square all over, they were going for democracy and equality against corruption. Nice slogans. But who benefited? Muslim Brotherhood, the extremists. When they were democratically elected, they began to oppress Christians. And so what happened? They abused the young students. They abused their zeal, and they took advantage of them to achieve their goal. So this is why I am a little bit suspicious here, looking at what is happening. And so, because there is ulterior motives in the hands of politicians. And here is also clearly Moses uncovers to his cousin his ulterior motive. But what he says, wait a second. You're saying, you're accusing me and my brother to be the most holy? Really? Is it a small thing to you that God separated you from congregation of Israel to bring you near to himself to do the work of the tabernacle? Are you not holy too, since you are doing the work of the tabernacle? Are you really not? Says Moses. Why is he saying that? Let's go with me again to the book of Numbers, but let's go to chapter 3. These are what the kids would call the boring chapters because they contain a list of names. And these boring chapters, they have all these counts of all different chieftains of tribes, but the tribe of Levi was not counted until chapter 3. And here in chapter 3, he is enumerating all the priests and Levites. First, the sons of Aaron. But then he goes and starts enumerating Levites, giving them assignments. Why? Because God chose Aaron this is what we can see. Why is it a challenge? So you see here, you see three brothers of sons of Levi: Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. Now I put only the sons of Amram and the son of Izhar. So these generation of the branch. And I'm going to show you this. So what God does, he selects Aaron and make him a priest. Well, the problem is that the word priest exists not only in the Torah, but also in pagan culture. In Egypt, priests were viewed as the privileged caste. And that is the problem. And not only in Egypt, I can talk about India, I can talk, it's modern, you know, these castes in India, the priests are the highest caste. So basically, what Korah says, he says, why is this guy a privileged caste? Moses, being a prophet, chose his brother and his children to be the privileged caste. We also want that. But this is not the case. What Korach doesn't understand is God is not electing Aaron to be a privilege. The same chapter, weekly Torah portion, which is Korach, but it's Numbers chapter 18, speaks about Aaron, particularly. You and your sons and your father's house shall bear the iniquity related to the sanctuary. And you and your sons with you shall bear the iniquity associated with your priesthood. So on Aaron and his sons lays responsibility, its primary responsibility. I was watching when back in the old days, nobody worried about any pandemic associated with a cruise ship. So Irina and I took the cruise, and on the cruise we took a special tour, what is kind of behind the stage tour, and they walked us into the every compartment of the ship, where the mechanics are, the engine room, where the steering controls are. And when they took us in, they were supposed to make us talk to have a captain talk to us. And we went up on the deck where the captain was, and I saw the man behind the helm controlling the ship, and I saw other officers of the ship in the main deck where controls are. And then but captain could not talk to us. Captain was very tense. He apologized. He said, look at this strait. And we saw, wow, it's a wide strait. This strait this was going into Anchorage. And he said, look at the strait. I need to steer that ship into that strait. And it was kind of an interesting that the captain was Italian. And I was wondering, why in the world is this captain so tense? I realized later how much responsibility is on the captain, even though the helmsman is there, the second officer is there, every officer is there, but the captain is still tense going through this strait. A year or so later, there was a big disaster on Costa Concordia, off the coast of Italy, where a captain, irresponsible, reckless captain, destroyed the ship, and some people died. I still saw this Costa Concordia last November around Venice. We drove by the dock, and they're still disassembling the ship. But it's a wreck. I mean, huge 80,000 ton wreck. This is because of the wreck was created. I mean, you've probably seen a car wreck. I don't know if you have seen in the dock a ship, how a ship which is wrecked loose. 80,000 ton wreck. And that is what this reckless captain did. Recklessness led to the wreck. And so Aaron is the captain of the sanctuary. For him is responsibility. God laid it on him. He didn't make him a privileged caste. Aaron is to bear responsibility. Well, what about Korah? Let's go back to what was Korah and his relatives were committed to by God. And you see here different sons of Levi. So it says here, number the children of Levi. So he numbers the children of Levi. And so you have Gershon, Kohath, and Merari, three major clans. So these are, again, the names of Gershonites, and the names of Kohathites, and the name of Merari. And now, again, you got an assignment. And to them, the duties were in the tabernacle of meeting, the tent with its covering, the screen for the door of the tabernacle, the screen for the door of the court, the hanging. So just to be responsible for some outer stuff. But when it comes Kohath, so you got Amramites and Izharites there. So from Amram, as you can see here in our family tree, Aaron comes and he is selected. But then the rest, you see, you have Amram, you have Izhar, Hebron, and these guys, they were selected on a very, very important mission. So their duty included the ark, the table, the lampstand, the altars, utensils of the sanctuary. Wow. And the veil that separates holy of the most holy. So these guys are the keepers and maintainers of the key elements of the temple. People often ask questions. Who washes the veil that separates between holy and the most holy? Because this veil is stained by blood. The answer is here. The sons of Kohath, the cousins of Moses and Aaron. Who maintains the ark? The answer is here. Who maintains menorah? The answer is here. What is it? Well, Aaron and his sons are visible. They offer sacrifices. They carry people's sins. But the cousins are making the also very important work. Without the work of cousins, what Aaron does will not last. More so, when two sons of Aaron approached the Most Holy in inappropriate time, they were with inappropriate fire and so forth, they were killed. But it seems like Izhar, sons of Izhar, such as Korah, because he is one of the rest of the Kohathites, who is given the maintenance of the most important elements, such as ark, they're not gonna die when they come to the ark, because they are committed with important mission. We have a studio now, and we ask young people to work. Not everyone is comfortable in front of the camera. And when I see someone who says, oh, I'm not comfortable in front of the camera, I say, so go behind the camera and work the crew. It's also important to make it technically right, because we are here in front of the camera. We have no control on anything. You control. So I always emphasize this is the same work, and one work is not possible without the other. And so this was the problem of what Korach did not understand. He completely distorted God's intention. Why? Because he was still thinking in terms of the pagan Egyptian culture. He refused to see that while in Egypt were priests and here's Aaron the priest, that God has totally different intention. And so the consequences came, and the earth has swallowed them, because God was protecting the people of Israel, because he needed them to reach the promised land of Canaan. All right?
So for Aaron, maybe it's because he thought of that important work as being too menial. It was a menial task and wasn't as important as what supposedly Aaron was doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions, points of discussions, debates?
I remember telling some of the students where I was doing substitute teaching, I said, you know, if it wasn't for the custodian in this school cleaning up and doing what this custodian is doing, the school would fall apart.
Mm-hmm.
Work is so very important. If that custodian is not there, the school couldn't continue.
Mm.
All right. My question
Yeah.
has to do with the text because we see they address to Moses, and at the end we see the high priest come. And what can help us identifying, the grudge they have against Moses had to do with Aaron, not to Moses.
Because this is what Moses says. And are you seeking the priesthood also? So that's why we see. The problem is, going back to here, the problem is we have Aaron and his sons imputed with holiness of a priesthood. We actually don't have Moses and his family. Moses does not function as a priest. Sons and children of Moses, if we go the family tree continuation, they're not the priests. It's only from Aaron. You have Nadab, Avihu, Itamar, and Eleazar. So these four become next generation of priests. Moses has his own children, Gershon and the other name. Yeah.
And Eliezer?
Yeah, Eliezer, thank you. They're not priests. We don't even know much about them. But for sure, they're not priests. So that's why the question of holiness here, when we look, is not all the congregation holy. This is definitely a question I would use as a scholarly term, a cultic question. So how come we're not holy? Well, the answer I gave, because you blew it with the golden calf. Only Levites didn't blow. So that's why not all congregation holy. But unfortunately, Korach, he pulled in the debate the Reubenites. And that's why he's playing politics. You see, this is what I say, ulterior motives. The question is not the whole congregation holy. In front of the Reubenites is a provocative question. Because it's like, yeah, God promised us, didn't it? Didn't he? And the answer, yes, he promised, but no, because you blew it.
Yeah. This is unfortunate. Yeah, he himself is a Levite, a Korah, and which is unfortunate. And I read that some of his children didn't participate in his revolt.
No,
Yeah.
no, because you have some sons of Korah who are perfectly fine. It's just him. God wasn't gonna make a genocide and destroy the whole family. No, he wasn't gonna do that.
So it was just his immediate family that were swallowed up.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
Any other points of discussions, questions?
So,
Yeah, Tom.
so how does this relate to the remnant idea?
I don't see this much as a remnant idea. The remnant idea is expressed differently, but not here. This is more of this one is not about remnant. This one is about if you want to know what New Testament passage and problem is this related, the best one is 1 Corinthians chapter 12.
You mean the connection with?
Is it like about election?
Yeah, look at this. Concerning the spiritual gifts, I don't want you to be ignorant. And so there are diversities of gifts, but the same Spirit. There are differences in ministries, but the same Lord. And there are diversities of activities, but the same God who works all in all. But the manifestation of Spirit is given to each one for the profit of all. For one is given the word of wisdom through the Spirit, to another is given the word of knowledge through the same Spirit, and so forth, prophecy, different kinds of tongues, and so forth. For the body is one and has many members, but all the members of one body, being many, are one body. Also in is Christ. So here is the example. A foot, if a foot should say, because I am not a hand, I am not of the body, is therefore not of the body. And the ear should say, because I am not an eye, I am not of the body, is therefore not of the body, and so forth. So that's the idea which is related to, because, you know, here are different assignments that different Levites receive, and they're very important. And so the same way as in the body, every piece of our body will scream to us the same when it hurts. You know, a toe, you think, what's the problem? Toe is not as important as the head. Well, in some cases, during the World War II, Nazi troops marched in Crimea and besieged the Russian town by the name Sevastopol, and the Russian Soviet Navy was there, and they defended Sevastopol for 200 days and so forth. The commander of all of it, named Admiral, the Admiral Oktyabrski, no, Admiral Isakov, that's the other one. He was wounded in his leg, and they brought him to hospital, and they said to him, "Sir, we have a problem because your leg is really doing very bad. We have to amputate it." And he said, "All right, go ahead and amputate it, just as long as you preserve my head." And, you know, his leg was amputated. He returned back to his duties and, you know, kept fighting. So, yes, this one shows that definitely we can survive without the leg and be productive and able to maintain the living and working. But I tell you one thing, if you ever have a gout, and it manifests in a joint of a toe, it hurts really bad. You won't be able to do anything with it. You'd just be sitting and doing nothing.
Because the pain controls.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Yeah, excruciating pain.
Mm-hmm.
So the kingdom of priests, you were saying, is conditional on obedience. So in this case, the Kohathites were not a kingdom of priests, but they didn't obey. So how does that apply? Maybe I missed something. How does that apply to, I will not get you? You know, can a woman forget her suckling child?
Well, what I was discussing, the text about if you keep my covenant is a condition upon for Israel to maintain the priesthood, but it is not everything about Israel is conditional. There are things that are unconditional, and I showed this, the can a woman abandon her suckling child? That is unconditional. So when we look at Israel and the prophecies about Israel, you see, you don't see everything unconditional and you don't see everything conditional. In Christianity, you got two ways, two contradictions. Like dispensationalists and people like this, they believe there are two roads, Israel here and Christians here. They're Gentiles. So the road called Israel is unconditional. Israel has its own way. Israel will be saved. All Israel will be saved, blah, 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 blah. So this, but there is opposition to this that say, no, this theory is not going to be right. There's only one people of God, not two. But Israel was before. But because they didn't meet the condition, boom, they dropped and the church continued. Well, it's not the same. It's not like this. Romans chapter 11 says only some branches were broken off.
Right.
So, Sasha, you have you given a study on the two covenants before? I mean, when it says that it talks about it was the second one was made on better promise, and this is maybe getting off the topic, but maybe in the future when we have another study on better promises. But I mean, it's not as if God had made, you know, if you look at it from a certain perspective, you might see that as God being in error there, but God doesn't make mistakes. It was the human element that was the issue there.
Yeah.
So sometime I would like to, when there's an opportunity to have a study on the two covenants.
Well, this is definitely a worthy topic. But what happens there in Romans chapter 8 and 9, it does say, oh, the previous covenant they didn't keep. But the new covenant is also made, according to Jeremiah, with Judah and Israel. Which it does, the new covenant is not made with Gentiles. That's the biggest problem. You know, this is again the two different extremes of contemporary Christian theology. One extreme says this: God is going to make new covenant with Gentiles, while Israel is still living under the old covenant. And the opposing side says God is going to make the new covenant with Gentiles, because under the old covenant, Israel failed to fulfill, and God rejected them. So both of these ideas are flawed because it says, I'll make the new covenant with Israel and Judah. And as we see in Hebrews chapter 8 and 9, the new covenant is rooted in heavenly sanctuary, while the old covenant is rooted in earthly temple, earthly sanctuary. And therefore, you have these differences. People misunderstand the nature of the covenant, and they go to the next mistake. They say, oh, the temple, the second temple was destroyed because of Israel's breaking the covenant. That's not true. The second temple was destroyed because it's fulfilled its purpose. If all Israel continued to follow the laws of the Torah and accepted Jesus, what's the point of the first temple anyway? Does it mean that they would continue offering sacrifices? Nonsense.
Right.
I still say in this context, we are all holy, aren't we?
Yes, when we look into Peter, it's 1 Peter 2:9. It says, but you are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, his own special people, that you may proclaim the praises of him who called you out of darkness into the marvelous light. This text is often being used by Christians to say that this is a replacement. See, Jews failed to do it, now it's the Christians. But this text is taken out of context. This text is not about Jews failing to fulfill the covenant, and now he gives it to Gentiles. What this text is saying is that under the new covenant, there is no more Levitical priesthood. There is a priesthood of all believers. Be this believer of Jewish origin or a Gentile origin. And I repeat
Amen.
Origin.
Amen. Great.
Indeed.
I have a question. Actually, it's not of this subject, and because this week I was preparing a sermonette, and I wanted to have this question answered, but unfortunately I couldn't find sources. I heard you spoke on this topic. It's about Isaiah 66 when it mentioned new heaven and earth. And I remember you said it doesn't really have to do with, heaven and earth. I said, the new heaven and earth I will create, and new Sabbath and new moon. I would like you to explain a little bit more.
Well, very simple here. It's kind of challenging to explain it without understanding the first chapters of Isaiah.
Yeah.
It's hard to explain the last, but here it is. It says, at the end, for as a new heaven and a new earth, which shall remain before me, says the Lord, So your descendants and your name will remain, and it shall come to pass from one new moon to another, from the Sabbath, from one Sabbath to another, all flesh shall come to worship before me, says the Lord. What's the mistake is this? This mistake is called paralleling.
Okay.
So we take new heaven and new earth that I shall make. But I make. Okay? So we go paralleling. Ta-da! Revelation 21.
Galatians 21.
Yeah, I saw new heaven and new earth.
Oh,
For the
yeah.
first heaven and the first earth pass away. That's Revelation 21.
Oh, Revelation.
Oh.
I heard Galatians.
No.
Okay.
So, and then there is the holy seat in New Jerusalem, and it's a tabernacle of God with man. And God wipe away every tear from their eyes, shall be no more death, sorrow, cry, and so forth. So this is the description of what is called eschatological or end time new heaven and new earth. But is it the same as in Isaiah? When you look specifically Isaiah 66, 22, this may appear like this. And then, of course, you have one Sabbath to another. Ta-da! Yeah, it means that we'll have Sabbath on a new earth. But what are we supposed to do with the new moon? Are we supposed to have a new moon? And what's this new moon deal? Oh, we need to read a little bit below. Again, Isaiah is a little more difficult, but it says here, I will set a sign among them, and those among them who escape. Now you see the remnant. Catherine, that's how it's described. I will send to the nations, to Tarshish, Pool, Lud, who drove the boat, to Tubal and Javan, to the coastlands of Pharaoh, who have not heard my fame, nor seen my glory. So they shall declare my glory among the Gentiles. They shall bring all the brethren to an offering to the Lord out of the nations on horses, chariots, litters, mules, and camels to my holy mountain, to Jerusalem. So we have a temple. And these people from all coastal lands are gonna come to God's holy mountain, to Jerusalem. And they come into the house of the Lord. And I will also make some of them priests and Levites. For as the new heaven and the new earth will remain, so descendants will remain. And now you understand why you have new moons here.
Yeah.
Isaiah is not talking the same language as John in the book of Revelation. Isaiah is on his own page, on his own wavelength, and his wavelength is the restoration of the glorious Davidic kingdom of Israel. That is what the new heaven and the new earth. It has local significance here, not local reach, not global reach, like in the book of Revelation. Why it never happened? Because that prophecy is conditional, And there are similar prophecies that are conditional, which are in the book of Ezekiel, like the prophecy of the temple. It's the same story and the same conditionality. And where is conditionality? Conditionality is right here in Isaiah 26. Let me find it. Isaiah 49.
Chapter 66.
Yeah, but he's talking about 49 now.
Isaiah 49. And here is the verse. Sorry, 48. That's why I cannot find it. And it says here very clear, go forth from Babylon, flee from the Chaldeans, with the voice of singing, declare and proclaim this, utter it to the end of the earth, say, the Lord has redeemed his servant Jacob. So you cannot just ignore the historical background of Isaiah. Isaiah speaks and predicts Babylonian captivity in the 8th century BC. And then he predicts the liberation from the Babylonian captivity. It was liberation from the Babylonian captivity that actually was very conditional. When liberation comes, they were all supposed to return. In fact, when we look at Isaiah 45, we see Cyrus as anointed one. This word anointed is Mashiach, but it's relating to Cyrus. So this is how it was planned for the people of Jerusalem and Judah to return back, all of them, and then they would have a second chance of creating a country, which would be an example with everything, including the longevity of life. Look at Isaiah 66, where it talks about new earth, right?
22.
New heaven and new earth. And now I want to show you Isaiah 65 with a similar example. Behold, which is the same idea. Behold, I create new heaven and new earth. The former shall not be remembered or come to mind. See, this is the idea that is present in the book of Revelation. So, but be glad and rejoice forever. I will rejoice in Jerusalem, the joy of my people. The voice of weeping shall no longer be heard in it, nor the voice of crying, nor shall an infant from there live but a few days, nor shall an old man who has not fulfilled in days, for the child shall die 100 years old.
Mm-hmm.
The new heaven, new earth, no children mortality, and a child will die until he lives 100 years old. So longevity of life, but not eternal life.
Right, right.
So Isaiah is not, even though the language is the same, but the prophecy is different. The context tells us.